Three, two, one. All right, we're cooking. All right, before we begin, rest in peace, Papa Francesca. Papa Francesco, my bad. Oh my gosh, off to a horrible start. Papa Francesco, rest in peace, Jorge Mario Bergoglio. Oh my goodness. What a time to pass away. Easter Day, in the morning, Easter Day, I believe. I'm not sure what time it was their time. It was like the middle of the night, our time here in America. And what a time. So many things to say. So first of all, let's start with Papa Francesco. So interesting. What a guy. So he's born December 17th, 1936 in Buenos Aires. He's the first kid of Mario, his dad Mario, who he shares a middle name with, who was an accountant, and his mom Regina, who was just a housewife. Their family comes to Buenos Aires in 1929 to escape Benito Mussolini. Ever heard of him? And apparently, so the Pope, he's got these siblings, Oscar, Marta, Alberto, and Maria. Maria is the only one still alive, and according to her, they didn't emigrate for economic reasons. So you can kind of fill in the rest. He has a niece. He has a niece, Christina, who's a painter based in Madrid. And here in her Wikipedia page, Christina, under personal life, it says she has described herself as spiritual but not religious. Now, that is to be spiritual but not religious is one thing. When your uncle is the Pope, the literal Pope of the Catholic Church, and his niece is not religious, what has stated, it's got a quote here from her. And we're quoting Christina Bergoglio here. "I'm not afraid to say I see the church is outdated." Wild, your uncle is in charge of the whole thing. "And that's why I believe life has put my... And that's why I believe life has put my uncle to renew this certain system of thought that was getting stagnated." Interesting. In one interview, she indicated that she only met Pope Francis once, where she, quote, gifted him a painting of the city of Assisi in Italy, and that she had not sought to meet him again out of respect for his job as a spiritual messenger and due to her own busy schedule. Interesting. I wonder, it'd be interesting to talk to her now and see what she thinks, because Pope Francis he was very controversial. He's a very controversial pope, as a lot of people are seeing. And I think one thing that's important for people to understand is, and you see this too as we're looking at who the next pope gonna be, is they try to map all of them. I saw this, they had like 10 different people they thought could be the next pope. And they try to map all of them onto this spectrum under American politics. So this American right versus left spectrum. And the problem is you can't do that, because the Catholic Church is an ancient institution that predates the thought of America. It predates the thought of America by thousands of years. The church has existed for thousands of years, and it plans to exist till the end of all things. That is a time scale hitherto unheard of in our world. Like, we hear about China thinking 40 years down the road, 50 years down the road. The Catholic Church is thinking in terms of millennia and eons. It's a completely different scale with completely different priorities that are largely devoid of modern politics, because the church has seen so many modern politics and has been so wrapped in modern politics the Holy Roman Empire, and it's been the center of so many things throughout history for so long. But at the end of the day, the church is not, when I say it's devoid of modern politics, it's devoid of, it doesn't care about, like, okay, for example here, right? We have many, many years ago, Sudan split into two different countries. Does that make a difference to the Catholic Church? No, it doesn't make a difference to the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church isn't so much concerned with countries as it is with people, right? And so when we're thinking about who the next pope is going to be, we have to think in terms of what the church thinks of. And the church thinks in terms of who can we have basically four types of people in the world. We have the people who are devout Catholics who go to church every day, or every week, sorry. Some every day, but go to church every week on Sundays. We have cultural Christians and cultural Catholics who maybe they attend other ceremonies. They don't attend the traditional Roman Catholic Mass, or they don't go to church outside of Christmas, maybe Easter. They'll go, but they don't go religiously, for lack of a better word. No pun intended. And then we have people who are atheist, agnostic, who don't have any religion. And then you have the fourth group of people who have a religion that's not Catholicism. And I believe the Catholic Church, and I think this is reflected by Pope Francis, is Pope Francis's whole thing was, how do we expand the church? How do we get more people to come into the Catholic Church? And a lot of times I see criticisms leveled on him because they are leveled through the guise of modern conservatism, not Christianity. Even though there is a Venn diagram with a large overlap, we saw it during the last presidential election here in America, that any Christian or Catholic who stood there and said, oh, this party 100% aligns with my ideals as a Christian would be wrong. They'd be blatantly wrong. There was no one party that fully embodied the spirit of Christianity and the teachings of Jesus. And so if you were in that position, you essentially, and this is a lot of the controversy you've seen since the election, is you've essentially had people in a position where they had to choose between two parties that didn't fully embody their ideas. And a lot of things go into that decision. And I would guess, I don't know this for sure, but I would guess most Christians, actually, we can look this up. Voting demographics of Christians in the 2024 election. I would think that most of them voted for Trump and voted for the Republican Party. But I would be interested to see what the percentage was. Colorado Springs Gazette. Here we go. I'm going to try to get through. I'm going to try to get through this while continuing to talk. But anyways, the Pope was Pope Francis was very concerned with trying to bring people into the fold, and a lot of people tried to get on him about a lot of his tactics of how he treated people in, certain communities that have traditionally been shunned by the Catholic Church, and more, I guess if you want to call it conservative, I would call it traditional hardline views of the Catholic Church on whatever issue, relating to whichever sin you want to relate to. But I think if you look at the teachings of Jesus, Jesus is trying to bring everybody into the fold. He wants everyone. You see that by his sacrifice. Jesus dies for everybody. People that follow him devoutly, people that deny him, everyone. He dies for all sin. And so, if you want to level the criticism and say that Pope Francis was too lax in his approach to welcoming people into the fold and that he compromised too much on Jesus' teachings, I think there's a very nuanced argument to be made there. But to say that he denied the teaching of Jesus, this man devoted his life to the poor. This man devoted his life to the underprivileged, devoted his life to people that had been traditionally shunned by the Catholic Church because of the sins that they committed in the church's eyes. And I just don't see how anyone can reasonably say that that's not attempting at his very best to follow in the footsteps of Jesus. I don't think Pope Francis had any ill intentions. And now maybe I'm wrong and we'll never know. But I don't see the maliciousness. I mean, the guy was hardly an extreme liberal. He said some crazy I mean, you can look up his quotes that he said about gay people. He dropped some bombs. It wasn't like he was this, LGBTQ, liberal, Bernie Sanders pope. Like, he was still very much a Christian and was just attempting to go after that fourth group of what I believe would be the fourth and third group of atheists, agnostics, and people of other religions. He was trying to bring them into the fold. And I think he did his best. I think he did a lot of commendable things. And he was a pope during an extremely tumultuous time. And I think he set an important precedent, and how do I say this? It's important sometimes that you have people that step up and say that when you have a book, okay, here's the best way to say it. When you have a book that's as dense as the Bible and has so many teachings and so many stories and so many things to learn, that it can be very easy to focus on certain ones because they feel they have more immediate applicability to your life, or that they feel like they're low-hanging fruit to go for. And it's important with something that dense that you have someone who steps up and says, well, don't forget about these other things that are in here that we're also supposed to be doing. And that these are also teachings. And we should also be striving to try to do these things the best we can. And when I think about his legacy, that's how I'm going to view him. Now, obviously, maybe stories change over time and we find out more about him. But as of now, that's sort of how I see him. What will be interesting will be who they pick next. Do they pick somebody who's going to continue to go after those groups of people who aren't religious or have a different religion? Or, and this is where I think they'll probably go, this is where I suspect they'll probably go, are they going to go after the group of cultural Christians? Because for a very long time, cultural Christians attended church because it was the cultural thing to do. And I'm not quite sure when it happened, but I would say sometime in the last 2 generations, since my grandparents' generation, cultural Christians stopped feeling cultural pressure to go to church, and that they could just be like, why do I need to go to church? Why can't I just be a good Christian and go out into the world and just live a godly life? And so that's what they did. And those are the people that, in my mind at least, and we'll see if the conclave agrees, that are the easiest to bring back into the fold because they already believe, or they already are devoted towards Jesus in some way, shape, or form. So you can go after the people that Pope Francis did, but in my mind, Pope Francis, maybe his greatest accomplishment is he seems to have expanded the number of cultural Christians. I don't know if he brought a lot of people physically into the church. I'm sure he brought some, but I don't know if he brought a ton. But I think he did get a lot more people to consider Jesus' teachings in a non-traditional way, or a non-hardline, through a non-hardline lens. And if they can bring those people in, that to me makes the most sense from the Vatican's point of view. And what priest can do that? Well, there's one cardinal. I'm going to get his first name wrong. Peter? I think it's Peter Erdo. He is a Hungarian cardinal of the Roman Catholic Church. Now, he is considered to be a more conservative pope, quote unquote. But again, you can't map politics onto the Catholic Church. Why one pope is considered more conservative is different from why another pope might be considered conservative, right? There are popes who are obviously very anti-LGBTQ, who are conservative for those reasons. There are popes who are very conservative. We lost a bunch of audio. But what I was saying was that there are popes who are conservative because they prefer like traditional rituals. And Pope Erdo is somebody who, from my understanding, one of the big things that he's always campaigned on is wanting to bring more people from different branches of Christianity back into the fold. And if you're thinking that Christians make up about 1/10 of the world, I mean, they make out about 1 billion people. And like I said, I don't know when the audio cut out, so I don't know where I got cut off. But so if I went over this, I apologize. But we know now that there's way more people in the world. That like 1 to 3 to 4 billion more people than we thought there were now is what they're saying. And so if before Christians were 1 billion people out of 8 to 9 billion, and now there's maybe 11 to 12 billion people, well, now we're looking at maybe closer to 2 billion Christians out there. Who knows? Assuming the ratios stay the same. I don't know if they did. But it seems to me that the next logical step is, because Francis did all of this work to bring in people from all of these disaffected areas, because we got so hard-lined with traditionalism, that bringing those people back into church is essentially what will make it makes the most sense to me. But again, I don't know what they're thinking. They think on such weird time scales and time turns, and you have this pope that they elect, and I think it was, like I said, maybe, like, I don't know where I got cut off, but one thing I had said was that I really think he will be remembered for a very important reason, because a lot of times when you have a book as dense as the Bible, there are so many lessons and so many things to do that it becomes very easy, when you're somebody who reads that book and follows it, to focus on the lessons and the commandments that are most applicable to your life, and forget about other ones that are still very important. And I think the church was in a position where there were a lot of different things that it stood for, but it had not been at the forefront. And one thing that Pope Francis did was bring a lot of these things to the forefront. And, was he perfect at it? No, he wasn't perfect. But he tried his best. And he brought a lot of people into the fold that otherwise wouldn't have been brought into the fold. And this was a man of the poor. This was a man of the sinners. And if you read the Bible, those are the people that Jesus comes for. Those are the people that Jesus comes to help. Now, in the Bible, it's interesting because when Jesus talks about sinners, he's talking about everybody. He says this, and you can look in the book of Matthew. It's like chapter 10 or 11, one of the two. And Jesus says that John the Baptist is the best person in the world. He is the best among you. And even the worst people in heaven are better than him. So essentially he comes and tells everybody, like, everybody needs help. And, we're going to focus on the most needy, but everybody needs help. And I think Pope Francis looked around and said, who are the most sinful people in the eyes of the church? I'm going to extend that olive branch. And I think that's a pretty dang good legacy to have if you're the Pope, considering some of the popes have a lot worse of a legacy. Now, where they go from there, like I said, Maybe they go to Erdo, who wants to bring more people back into mass. It's just so hard to know what they think, because generally speaking, countries that think the longest ahead and in the largest timescales are the oldest countries. So America is very new, and we think in very short timescales. We think in 2 years. Like, whenever a president gets in, it's always, what can they do in the first 100 days? What can they do before midterms? That sort of thing. Whereas you look at China, that's a much older country, and they don't think like that. They think in terms of 40 years, 50 years. How do we succeed in decades from now, in generations from now? And it's a totally different time scale. And one thing that's so unique about the church is that when we think about ancient China, when we dig into ancient Chinese soil and we look into the history of it, we are seeing the history not of China, but of a people. We see the history of a people, and that there were people during dynastic China, there were people pre-dynastic China. There have been many different peoples that have lived over time in this place that we call China, that are the Chinese people, that are genetically, DNA-wise, they are from China. And when we look at ancient Rome, is that Italy? Well, yes and no. It's not the country of Italy currently that we understand, but it is the history of certain Italian people. And it is the history of, the people that have come before. And as we try to learn about them, we are able to peel back the layers. We are able to look at, how did they make their concrete? What's in their concrete? How are we able to make it? We read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. We read the writings of Julius Caesar. We read about all of these Roman emperors, and Tiberius and Augustus, all of these people that have come, and we're able to slowly piece together this big narrative of what were people trying to accomplish, what was the goal, how did things move forward, what really happened. And will we ever know what really happened? No. But we're able to get a pretty dang good idea of it. And you can do this anywhere. We can do this in America. It's harder to do it recently, because a lot of that stuff has more bearing on what's happening, because people don't want to, give up that they're doing bad stuff, so they conceal it. But when you look at the Vatican, when the Vatican starts, it's not an ethnic group. It's not a cultural group. There's no DNA that can trace you back to the Vatican, other than if you have, if you're Christina Bergoglio and you are the niece of the Pope. But, from when the church starts till now is unbroken. It wasn't like there was a previous iteration of the Catholic Church before St. Peter. He was the beginning, and it's been unbroken since. And it's so unique. And another unique element about it is when you take the Vatican equivalents in other religions, when you look at places like Mecca, or you look at, very important sites in Hinduism in India, or Buddhism in Asia, or Islam in the Middle East, or Judaism in Israel. They are parts of countries. They are places within countries that you can go and you can worship. But the Vatican is a country. It is its own thing. It's its own country, into and unto of itself, that has its own rules and its own sovereign standing within the world. I really would love to know that if anyone listens to this and they know someone who's an expert on these types of things, I would love to talk to them. I'm so interested, because there's so much concealment. It's maybe not concealment. It's guarded. I think guarded is a better word. They're very guarded. Because famously, if you want to look into the archives of the Vatican, you have to apply with an application and say that I want to look at this specific thing for this specific reason in this specific thing that I believe exists in the archives. And then the Vatican can look at it, and if they have that thing, but they don't want you to see it, then they can say, no, your request is denied. And if they don't have that thing, then they will say, no, your request is denied. So you don't know at the end of the day if the thing that you requested to see is even in there and if it even exists. Oh my gosh, the secrecy and the things that are talked about that are being in there, the objects of power, the what would you even call it? The remnants, I guess, of the Roman Empire and so many other empires, surely, that are in there. Oh my gosh. So many. It beyond fascinating. That would be someone I need to talk to. I need to find somebody to talk to about that to have on. Christina Bergoglio. Her art is not bad. Her art is not bad. Before we get too far off topic, her art is pretty decent. Like, there are I'm looking at some great pictures here of New York City, and it's for those of you who can't see it, which is everybody because this is audio only. It's like paintings of New York City as if it's remembered in a dream. There's a dreamlike thing about it, but it's more than that. It's memory. It's memories of a place, of a feeling, of a moment in time. Like, when you think back and like you have these moments that you remember, like snapshot pictures of time. That's what it really feels like. And very cool. Very good art. Would love to get a piece. Would love to get a piece one day. But the reason I brought up Papa Francesca, and one of the things I was hoping to see in his Wikipedia page that I wasn't able to see, is one of the reasons he became a pope was because the girl that he loved, I believe it was in middle school or high school, one of the two, rejected him. And I can't remember her name, and I was trying to look up to her name. Imagine you reject a guy and he's like, well, I'm taking a vow. I'm taking the vow and I'm becoming a priest. I'm going into the priesthood. And you're like, all right, well, it seems big extreme. Bingity bongity boo, 50 years later, look at you, the Pope. Crazy. Imagine, I'm like trying to think, like, I'm trying to think of like a girl that I said no to a date on, and then in 30 years, she's Mother Teresa. And I go, wow. And then you have to explain to people, like, that girl asked me out on a date, and I said no. And they're like, you said no to Mother Teresa? And you're like, yeah. And then you have to explain why you thought Mother Teresa would be a bad date. I would love to hear that lady's explanation as to why she turned down the Pope. Like, you try, like, I guess girls don't like nice guys. I don't know. He was definitely not, like, he was a bouncer at a nightclub for a little bit. It wasn't like he was just like a pushover. Gosh, I mean, if you're looking for a man who puts Jesus first, it's tough to beat the Pope. Oh my gosh. But one of the reasons I was thinking about that is one of the things I saw this article recently. I was reading this article that was talking about how about a third, but not a third, a little under a third, about 30% of 30-year-olds nowadays are not married and have never been married, compared to much lower percentages in history's past. And I'm at this age now. I'm almost 30. I'm about a year and a half away from 30. And I am single, so I'm going to be a part of that 30%. I'm almost certainly not going to meet somebody and get married within the next year and a half. But, at my age, my parents were literally my parents. Like, they were together and they were getting pretty close to having me. I think my dad may have been a father at my age. And many of my friends, their parents were already parents at my age. And I have friends who are parents already and who are getting married and that sort of thing. And I've been thinking about this a lot of my goal is 100% find a wife and lock it in. Find that wife, lock it in. But to do that, you have to think through, like, what do you want? And there's so much dating advice that's out there. And so I'm just going to like talk through it in real time. And maybe I get nowhere with it. Maybe I get somewhere with it. And maybe it's not even interesting at all. And if it's, obviously just turn the podcast off if it's not interesting. But I think the first thing you got to do is, before you even assess yourself, I think you have to think about, what do you need and what do you want in a wife? And I'm going to talk about this, but I think it applies broadly, these concepts of, okay, you need a wife who is a good wife, but also a good mom, because I want to have a family and I want to have kids. And when you have kids, it is my observation that it no longer becomes about you. It's all about the kid. You have to do everything for the kid, especially when they're newborns. You have to attend to all of their needs because they're so unself-reliant. And not only do you have to do that, but all of these sacrifices that you make no longer become about you. Like working all these hours no longer pays for that thing you wanted or this other thing that you wanted. Now it pays for your kids' daycare. It pays for, birthday presents. It pays to do a vacation. It pays for all of these things for your child. So in thinking about that, and in thinking about, what kind of a mom do you want in that situation? Well, you want someone who's very emotionally intelligent, obviously, because the emotions of a child are very unintelligible, but also very intelligent at the same time, where everything the kid feels is valid. Everything the kid feels is right when they're born. If they're upset, they're always right. And you have to attend to them. And deciphering what that is requires emotional intelligence. And in general, you want someone who's emotionally intelligent, because you're going to have, this is a great rule that my mom told me that I really believe in, that when you're thinking about, would this person be a good person to marry? Would this be a person that I could raise a kid with? A great thing to think about is, could me and this person at 2 a.m. on a Monday morning, we both got to be up in a few hours to go to work, and we're tired. We've not slept well for a week. And the baby's in the other room and it's screaming. Screaming. And we have no idea why. Either of us. We have no idea why. And we're sleep deprived, and we're annoyed with ourselves, and we're annoyed with work, and we're annoyed with all these other things, and we're a little annoyed with each other, and we're a little annoyed with the baby, and under those circumstances, can the two of us have a productive conversation that, number one, helps the baby and addresses the baby's problem, and number two, doesn't ruin our relationship, doesn't hurt our relationship, doesn't negatively affect our relationship in any way? That is an elite level of communication that needs to exist, and it requires an emotionally intelligent person to be able to do that with. But also you need emotional intelligence in the sense that as the kid gets older, when they start to complain, they're no longer right every time. That baby, that 3-month-old baby that was crying that you have to attend to, when they're 3 years old, if they start crying, that doesn't always mean that they're right to be crying. It doesn't always mean that they're right. And it means that you need to sometimes step in and say, listen, you're the problem here. Teaching kids how to regulate their emotions, how to regulate their feelings, how to interact with the world, how to interact with themselves and other, authority figures, and how to interact with the general public, and how to interact, maybe most importantly, with their friends in daycare, how to know their own strength, how to play fairly, how to play with people in a way that makes people want to play with them more afterwards and not less, and that people like them. One great piece of advice that I've always heard is, don't let your kid do anything that makes you not like them. which I think is a great thing. Like maybe in general, like don't let your friends do things that make you not like them. Step up, say something, that sort of thing. And having that emotionally intelligent mother with you or husband who can tell those different things apart, I would think is extremely important in raising a kid and disciplining a kid and knowing when to discipline a kid, knowing when your kid is right, and then being able to step up and say, no, you're right here, and then say, no, you're wrong here. I watched a very interesting video about the proper applications of timeouts and how to properly use a timeout. Because timeouts come about when kids misbehave, right? So you got a 3-year-old and he's throwing a hissy fit and he's calling you all sorts of names. And you say, all right, timeout. And you put him on the bottom of the steps and you say, you sit here until you're ready to be a good person and rejoin us. When you're ready to act properly, you can rejoin us. And the trick is that a lot of times people put people in timeouts and they say, sit here until I say so. But it's not what you want. You want the incentive to be for them to emotionally figure out how to work through their feelings. And it's going to be complex. And you might need to check in with them and say like, hey, are you ready? And they might go, nope, not yet. Nope. And you're like, okay, well, we miss you and we're ready when you're ready. And the key is that once they're ready and they say they're ready, that you let them in and that you don't hold their hissy fit against them, that you incentivize the regulation of their emotions and their feelings and helping them to develop that skill so they don't become grown infants who can't regulate themselves. Very important and a very powerful tool in that process. So you have a wife who is emotionally intelligent, who you can have communications with and is a good mom. And then other little things that I would think like one of the things that I look at would be like an Instagram feed where I look through it and I ask myself a couple questions. I ask myself like, could I show my mom this feed? Yeah, I could show my mom this feed. How would I feel if this was my daughter's feed? I would feel good. This is a great feed. It shows lots of vibrance and interests, and it shows well-traveled, lots of friends, hanging with friends, that sort of thing, but also shows that they're not like taking themselves too seriously and that they're joking around and that they're not addicted to social media and that sort of thing, and that they have a real life in the real world, that sort of thing. I think those are very important things to ask yourself, because the odds are that your daughter would be some version of your wife, you and your wife. And your son would probably be some version of you and your wife. And the standard that, in the same way that, they say like fathers, you set the standard for men for your daughters and for your son. Women do the same thing. The moms set the standard of what it means to be a woman for their daughters, hopefully. And they set the standard of what the son should expect from women, but also how to treat women. And I think that is a very important thing, that a mother, that you find a wife that demands the proper respects and stands up for that and doesn't let other women, but other men especially, mistreat her, and has that sort of strong moral fiber in that area. So you have that. And then you sort of reverse from there. And I think this is the part where it comes into self-analysis for me, is you sort of, you build this woman in your head. Okay, this is the girl I'm shooting for. And then you reverse back. And the way I look at it is like, what kind of a guy would she want to date? And I know there's this big thing about like, you should be yourself and don't change yourself. Don't change yourself for anybody. And I agree. Like if you're into trains and somebody says, I'm never going to date you unless you agree to never look at trains again. Or you're really into WrestleMania and people say that's a deal breaker for me. Like, don't change that part of yourself for somebody else. But, you know, if the qualities that you need to change are, maybe you need to be a bit politer, you need to be a bit braver, you know, you need to look after yourself a bit more. These are things that that have been sort of lumped under the guise of self-development, but I really don't view them as self-development. I just view them as normal maturation. And I feel like those two things kind of get divorced sometimes when they should essentially be the same thing. But sometimes self-development can, and this is the distinction I would make. Self-development is the pursuit of the best form of self in so far as you become a better human than other humans, right? It's, if you think of like this rat race to get to this certain level of being a human, of being super fit or super wealthy or super successful, you know, it all involves this competition of winning and being number one. And maturation to me is more about becoming more valuable to your community and valuable to your future, and being more integrated within I guess the social scientists would say like hierarchies, but more integrated within the zeitgeist that you inhabit, the zeitgeists maybe that you inhabit, of, okay, here's a good example. Here's a great example. If you are a business person and you pursue a track of self-development, that will lead you to being the wealthiest businessman, or the businessman who owns the most businesses, or starts the most businesses, or has the most successful businesses, whatever it takes. If you become the most mature businessman, that businessman becomes the most useful businessman to society. Not necessarily the most successful, not necessarily the most powerful, but the most useful to society on large. So I think that's an important distinction to make. So I don't necessarily see this reverse engineering of finding a wife as a self-development. I see it as a maturation thing of, how do you make yourself as most useful, of most utility to a partner? Because what I've set forth is a partner that is of the highest utility to me within a relationship. So how do you reciprocate that? Because if you want that, you know, if I set this out, if I set this standard out, and then I go out and I just say, well, I'm myself and I'm just going to find this person and expect them to date me, that's pretty crazy, because this person will be able to command a high standard themselves. And because they're emotionally intelligent, and because they stand up for themselves, and because they are, I would say, an independent person in the best sense of the word, not in the, I would say, the co-opted sense of the word, where this idea that you don't need anybody, not that, you know, that's not the key to inner, resolve or inner strength or anything like that. Life is very much like walking on a tightrope, and this, pursuing that without any safety nets is possible, but it's not wise, because we're almost all going to fall. And so you want as many safety nets underneath. You want that family safety net, that friend safety net, that coworkers safety net, that community safety net. And I think a big reason you see a lot of people very anxious right now and very depressed is because they know they have to cross that tightrope, but they don't feel they have really strong nets underneath them to catch them. Anyway, you have this person that you want to be your partner, you want to be your wife, and you want to reciprocate that to them and say, well, okay, if this is what I want, Who does this person want to be with? And the things that they're going to want from you, and the things that I suspect they would want from me, are only going to drive me to be the most mature version of myself. You know, this person, none of these qualities that I've laid out, I don't think would preclude my love of gardening or my love of TV shows or my love of YouTube videos or, you know, my love of chess or hockey or, you know, my love of watching birds run. I love watching birds run. I think that's the funniest thing in the world. Watching monkeys rob people. Oh, I saw this unbelievable video. There was this monkey. There's this place, I don't know where it is. I think it's in Bangladesh or Indonesia somewhere, but there's like this little reserve you can go see monkeys. And the monkeys come down and they beat the living bejesus out of these people. It's not even like there are pickpockets, human pickpockets that are nicer. These monkeys don't just come down and like quickly swipe your credit card out of your wallet. They're whacking people. They're women in on vines and just hitting people, humping, and just getting right on top of people. And and then you'll see the people scream, and they're trying to get them out of their hair. And the monkey will just come in and they'll take the purse and they snatch it away. And they're running and there's lipstick and there's all sorts of stuff going everywhere. And the monkeys they rip out a single like Cheetos packet and then they run away with it. And they take the whole bag too. It is a violent, brutal shakedown that these monkeys are running. But it's also so soft and gentle at the same time because they're just little fuzzy monkeys. Just little curious Georges. But they got a demon inside of them, brother. They got a deep demon inside of them. A little monkey demon. Monkeys make the funniest noises. They make the funniest noises. I was listening to a TikTok of birds making different sounds. And they had the loon in there, which was really cool. Maine loon shout out. But they had all these other birds. And some of them, like, I was just closing my eyes thinking, like, imagine you're in the jungle. Let me see if I can find this thing. Imagine you're in the jungle. I don't even know if I'll be able to play it so people will be able to hear it. But imagine you're in the jungle. And then all of a sudden, you just hear this bird like, oh, here we go. Listen to some of these sounds. This first one is like a siren screaming fee-haw. Let's see if we can hear it. Yeah, right there. Imagine you hear that you're out just in the woods on a walk. This is Australia, an Australian bustard. And you hear this. I would poop my pants. That's a dinosaur. That is a dinosaur. Oh my gosh. They're raptors. Like all of these birds, they came from like that. It's crazy to think about because the dinosaurs were essentially birds. They were essentially big birds. Like a lot of dinosaurs they think were feathered. Like the T-Rex and stuff, they think they were feathered. And so you have these birds nowadays that are like what's left of the dinosaurs, kind of like chickens are the last remaining, are like the last direct descendant of like the velociraptor. And you see it when they run. You see that velociraptor. They're just these little tiny things. But if a chicken was like the size of an elephant, that would be the scariest. It would be like they'd be sucking down people left and right. We would have hunted them to extinction shortly because they would have been a problem. Like notice, like cave bears, problem for us, and they're gone. Thank God. Thank the good Lord, they are gone. But just like the only thing standing between you and a chicken is the fact that you're big. If you weren't big, chicken will rip you apart. There was these videos of chicken eating mice, and they give them the steamboat special. They rip them apart. It is brutal. And we think of them as these nice little, old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I. Oh my goodness. What they will do to you if they could. You see it in their eyes too. There's no empathy in a chicken's eyes. There's no empathy in a chicken's eyes. There's no humanity in there. Obviously, they're a chicken. I think a fowl is a great name for them. They are vicious creatures, and they are so good at pooping out one of the most delicious things. It's very true when you think about it. What are the odds that one of the most delicious birds? Because if you've ever had, like quail eggs or duck eggs, they're not great. They're not great. I know a lot of people like them. They're not good. They're not a chicken egg. And the meat from other like turkey and all these other animals, it's okay. It's not great. It's not okay. We all agree chicken is the best. Good chicken is the best. Nothing beats chicken wings. Nothing beats chicken wings. Nobody's going to the Super Bowl for some turkey wings. Nobody's doing that. All right. Nobody's going down to KFC. People are going down to KFC. They're not going down to, KFD, Kentucky Fried Duck, or, Kentucky KFQ, Kentucky Fried Quail, or anything like that. They're not looking for anything except that Kentucky Fried Chicken. That's what people want. Boy, is it delicious. And my gosh, like, how lucky are we that they can't fly away? Like, ducks can get away quick. Quails get away quick. They're not easy to catch. You can run down a chicken. You can run. I watched Sylvester Stallone do it. Sylvester Stallone can catch a chicken. You can catch a chicken. I'll say that till my dying day. If Sylvester Stallone can catch a chicken, any one of us able-bodied, military-aged people can catch a chicken. So I don't want to hear nothing about it. And they just make the most delicious food. It worked out perfectly. Oh my gosh. To hear those noises though, you're fighting ghosts. You're fighting demons. You're on demon time at that point. I don't even know if that's what that means. Holy macaroni. What was I talking about before? What was I talking about? Oh yes, how to find a wife. So, how to find a maybe you need to do what the birds do. They make these like can't do that over Hinge. I guess you could. You could post a video. Maybe someone try that. Maybe I'll try that. I'll make that noise on Hinge and see if it gets a lot of action. Maybe that will be like. There's got to be a equivalent. So, actually, speaking of dinosaurs, during the dinosaur time, I believe our ancestor that was alive, or the thing that they think we evolved from at that time, was like this squirrel thing, big old squirrel thing. So next time you see a squirrel, those are the homos of the future. Those are the Homo sapiens of the future. So we should be nice to the squirrels. We should be nice to them, because hopefully they remember us fondly once they are bipedal and their big bushy tails have shrunk into a very small tailbone, and they're mostly hairless, and their faces have sort of molded into these human-like faces, and the millions and millions and millions of years from now, and they look back on us, and they will remember. They'll make movies about us, where a future squirrel humanoid will make a movie about this mad squirrel humanoid scientist who found this, human sperm and egg frozen in an ice cap, and then they extracted it from like a mosquito's belly. A mosquito had sucked the sperm and egg out of people, and they find it, and then they take that and they make this human being, and they make it, and they call it, what age are we in? What age are we even in? That would be the name of what age are we in? Because there was the Jurassic age. Whatever age we're in, that's the name of the movie. We're in the Hylicean epoch. Okay, the Hylicean. Mega Hylian. So yeah, they call it Hylicean Park. and they make it. And they have all of these exhibits where they got Homo erectus and they got Homo neanderthalis, and they're like, oh, we tracked Homo habilis at 15 miles an hour, able to run. And they're like, oh my gosh. But then they got that one exhibit for Homo sapiens. They get that one exhibit. They put that little goat in. They elevate that goat, and they got those little squirrel humanoids and little yellow Ford Focus. What was that? Ford Jeep. They got Jeeps. That's what they had. The Jeeps, Ford Rangers. And they're looking out, and then all of a sudden, that goat just gets ripped apart by these humans that you can't even see. They're off camera. And then all of a sudden, there's a storm that hits the island, and the power goes out. And the homos are released, the Homo sapiens. And they are hunting down every squirrel humanoid and squirrel humanoid child on the island. And then it's a race against the clock. And oh my gosh, the Neanderthals are working. And at the very end, the squirrel humanoids and the squirrel humanoid babies, they're like all back too as the Neanderthals are closing in on them. And then out of nowhere, the Homo sapiens come out and they just take them down and give the squirrel people enough time to escape. And as the squirrel people is going out, they're like, but what it says is like, I have decided not to invest in your park. And the other squirrel's like, so have I. And then it cuts back and it shows a Homo sapien driving a spear into a Homo Neanderthal. And then the Homo sapien just runs out, I would cry, and the banner falls, and it says, when homos ruled the earth. And it'll be a blockbuster hit. Oh my gosh, that would be an unbelievable movie. And we're going to miss it because it's not going to be made for 10 million years. Crazy. How to find a wife. So, I think I got these good things, and I just don't see Hinge as working. I think it could work. I just don't think I think it's hard to express these things that I think actually matter in a relationship over Hinge because it is so superficial. And, I think here's a good way to say it. The odds that I find someone with all of these qualities as attractive are much higher than the odds that I find someone attractive with all of these qualities, because these qualities will inherently make that woman more attractive to me, versus you go for pure attractiveness up front, and then every time they don't have these qualities, or they have something different, or the opposite, where they're not emotionally intelligent, or they don't communicate well, and they just become less and less attractive to you. And I just don't, I'm not someone who just plays the game as a player. So as you could probably tell by just how I said that sentence. So, I just don't see the utility. And like, it's so easily gamed. A lot of guys go on Hinge and they're like, well, there's no attractive girl. Here's a little tip. If you're listening and you're on that app, when a like comes in after you make your profile, if you don't like the girl, don't get rid of it. Just leave it in your inbox and let the likes pile up. So after, a month or so, you got a couple hundred likes in there. And I believe the algorithm looks at that to some degree to determine how attractive women are, because what I've found is when I leave it and when I've left it, that I consistently get the most attractive girls in the area. But if I work through all of them and I, swipe on all of them, make a decision, and then I keep it at 0, that's not the case. So that's just my 2 cents on that. If you decide to use that system, that is a good way to get the most out of that system. But I'm still in the process of trying to figure out, my first 2 girlfriends I had to ask out in person. And then the 2 after that, I did meet on there. But what I've noticed is that the 2 girls that I asked out in person, they lasted 1.5 years and 3 years. And the 2 that I asked out over Hinge lasted a month. Now, maybe that's coincidence, maybe it's not. But obviously I'm like a lot of guys. I want the most visual, like, I want all these qualities, and I want a visually very attractive girl. And one of the things I think about a lot is that one of the thing you have to ask yourself as a man when you're dating a beautiful woman is, do I really want to date a beautiful woman? Am I prepared for that? Because if you want to date a beautiful woman, then you have to be prepared for other guys to want to date her too. And the more beautiful of a woman you want, the more guys who are going to want her. And it's so easy to go for her because she's beautiful. And then once you get her, you start almost like, what would I say? Like almost punishing her for being beautiful by just, you get on her about, oh, you're wearing this thing and that's not appropriate, and what are you doing, and blah, 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 blah. And you just get on her about all this stuff. And she's like, geez. And then the poor girl just, okay, so she stops doing that stuff because she's trying to be a good girlfriend and trying to listen, and a good partner. And then these same guys are just like, what happened to the beautiful girl because I'm like, well, you idiot. You're the one who told her to stop putting effort in. You're the one who told her that you were upset that she was doing all of these different things and getting dressed up and making an effort because you were so insecure with yourself and insecure within your relationship, and you don't know how to communicate your feelings and don't know how to regulate yourself. Like, did you not think this through? Did you not think this through when you liked her photos and you saw that she had thousands of people following her? She only followed a few hundred people, yet she had thousands of people following her, and she's clearly beautiful. Who do you think most of those people are? Guys who want to date her, or guys who just want to get with her. You didn't think that through, and now you're all upset that their guys are still pursuing her even though she's with you. Do you not know men? Do you not know how they work? Do you not know how their minds work? So you got to ask yourself, like, if you don't want to deal with that, okay, but understand what kind of girl you're probably going to end up dating. And understand what that means. And don't complain when you get that. And don't complain when that's all that's left. If you want to date a beautiful woman who brings a lot to the table, then number one, she's going to command a lot of options and a lot of attention. And number two, if you don't want to feel so insecure, then build yourself up. So you bring a lot to the table to keep her there before she has a kid with you. I mean, that's what the dating period is. Like, she's feeling you out. If she has lots of options, and options are a double-edged sword of, sometimes it would be easier if you didn't have as many options. Like, if you think about, if you could only marry a girl that you went to high school with, which girl would you marry? And you're like, okay, probably this one. And then and if she had the same option, then from there, maybe you could work stuff out because you don't really have another choice. But when your options are the entire world, potentially 5, 6, 7 billion women, now you're like, well, I can get picky. I don't know about that. I think I say all these things, but outside of just like that core thing, like those core things that I just mentioned, I think if you can get that, and then including everything else, 80, 90% of everything you're looking for, and they feel the same way, like, man, like, let's just pull the trigger. You're never going to find 100. Let's pull the trigger. Let's get married and let's start a family. So that's the hope. And like I said, I don't think it'll be done before 30, but I am working on it and trying to figure out where that is at, and where those girls even are, because they're out there, and it's like, how do you reach them? I really think of, like, if I go to the club on a Thursday night, am I going to find that girl there? No, probably not, because she wouldn't be out clubbing on a Thursday night. She's responsibility. She has things to do. Maybe there's an off chance, but at least for me, I don't think I'm going to find that person I'm looking for there. But how do you find someone who's in sleep at a reasonable hour? You just sort of hope and you luck into running into them. There was this interesting thing I had heard in this vein. of, they were talking about how currently how people meet people, we talk about it as a deviation from the normal of guys approaching girls in public and asking them out. And what they were saying is even that was a deviation from the normal, and the deviation from how most people have historically found their person, which is they went to my high school, they went to my church, they were the daughter of a friend, of a parent, or a neighbor. They were in the community. And in that sense, you had almost like not an arranged marriage. I mean, some people had arranged marriages, but you had this person that not only did you know, but your community knew. And you had this vetting process for them of, it's not the stranger from the internet. It's the stranger, but my best friend who I trust says that they're a good person. And they say, this person, this best friend who knows this woman well and knows me well, is saying they think we should be good together. Or that's your parents who know you pretty well, saying based on what they know about the other person from their friends, like there's reasons to suspect that. And I think that's why you probably see a lot of those dates work out a lot more. And now there's more reasons to that, but that just doesn't really exist anymore. The number of people that meet because, a parent introduced them, like it exists, but definitely not in the numbers it used to exist way back in the day for most of human history. So, where does that leave us in modern dating? I don't think I really solved anything today, but I feel pretty optimistic about it. I feel very optimistic about it because I feel like we're really in a time of cultural shifting where we're sort of coming to a head where everybody is expressing themselves in this moment. Like everybody is expressing themselves in this moment. And people are starting podcasts like moi, and people are going on, and there's experts talking, and all of these, and so many ideas are being thrown out there. And I think you'll see over this generation and the next generation, you'll see the best ideas will win out. And what will be interesting for me to see is if any non-religious ideas win out. Because I think really the big reason you see a lot of religions still around is that whatever you may think of them, if you abide by those structures, you're going to have a family and you're going to reproduce. Look at Mormons. Mormons are getting married super early. They're having lots of kids. And if, that's a great strategy for having more Mormons in the next generation. Like it's a force multiplier versus, if your ideologies of listening to Harvard scientists and therapists and all these other people that try to get your life together are yielding 30% of people unmarried by 30, one of those groups is going to last a lot longer than the other. And, I don't think that means that, you have to be religious to have a successful marriage. You don't. And just because you are religious doesn't mean your marriage will be successful at all by any means. But it's more to illustrate a point. So, yeah, I know. And I think the last thing I was thinking about in that sort of that same idea was, I'll grab a drink here. So back in the day, right? Calories really affect when you hit puberty. If you have lots of calories and you have good nutrition, you will hit puberty a lot earlier. And so I was thinking about a lot of the, like the biblical things that Jesus tells us to do before, in the realms of getting married and what to do pre-marriage, because that's where I'm at right now. And one of the things he obviously asks is to abstain and to be chasteful. And in Jesus' time, maybe let's say nowadays your boy, you hit puberty at 11, 12 years old, right? 10, 11, 12 years old, somewhere in there. Well, we have really good nutrition. And kids are hitting puberty earlier and earlier and earlier. And it's starting to become a problem because they're hitting puberty really early. But back in the day, those kids were probably hitting puberty a couple year or 2 years later. So if you're hitting puberty at 13, when today you'd hit it at 11, and then the ask is then wait 4 years, and when you're 17, 18 years old, then you're going to marry this girl, and probably you'll have a little bit before her. You'll be with her a little bit before, and it'll be somewhat arranged. Like that's if you're living in that time period, that's probably, to the best of my knowledge, and I need to find a historian to double check this with, but I'd be like, it's not a huge ask to say be chastiful and abstain for 4 years. But if you're hitting puberty at 11 and you're not going to get married until after 30, let's say you get married at 33, that's 2 lifetimes to go. You're asking this 11-year-old to wait 2 more of their lifetime. So their whole lifetime that they've had again, and then again a second time before to abstain for that long. That is a totally different ask. That is a daunting task. And the room for them to commit sin, based strictly upon what Jesus says, and fall into temptation in that time period becomes way more feasible and way more likely, because now they have no adult supervision for most of that. They don't live with their parents anymore. They don't have teachers around them. Like, they're just out in the world, adults. And so I think we would all agree as a society, like the idea of like having a kid, getting married and having kids at 18 sounds crazy to us. Like, I look back on some of my ancestors who started having kids at 16, it's not 16, 17, 18 years old, Irish farmers who had 10, 12, 13, 15 kids and got started very young. And I look back and that's insane to me, because I think about myself when I was 17, 18 years old. I had no way I could have been a good father. And I think we look at that as normal because the brain doesn't fully develop until we're in their mid-20s. But, just for the thought experiment of it, I guess, what if, just to play around with the idea, what if we presuppose that what Jesus says is true and that what Jesus says is best? And then reverse that and the question becomes not, the statement becomes, the question becomes, why aren't kids ready to get married at 18? And it sort of goes into this bigger question of when I hear people talk about, they're in their 50s and they say, I didn't have kids because I knew I wouldn't be a good parent because of this, this, and this. And I think that's and they say it proudly. And I think that's so crazy, because what I hear is a person saying, I have these issues and I didn't do anything to fix them because they're not issues if I don't grow up and I don't have to take on more responsibility than myself. Which is okay, fair enough. But maybe we'd have a better society if every person in society strove to be, whether you decide to have kids or not is irrelevant. You strove to be someone who could take care of kids and be a role model for kids. God forbid you have a close friend or a sibling and their husband or their spouse or their wife pass away and they leave you in charge of their kid that they had. You should be able to look after that kid. You should be able to babysit that kid. Maybe we should all strive to be that person who could look after a kid and not be a 50-year-old who proudly flaunts all of these things and says, I'm the mature person because I didn't have a kid. Instead of saying, I'm mature and I was able to figure all these things out and I could have had a kid. I just didn't want to. I would think that, to me, is a way more respectable place to be. I respect that person way more. I still think that you should have kids, if for no other reason than who is going to bury you. Like my grandpa has been very sick, um, with a bunch of injuries, and he was in this rehab facility with a lot of other old people who were not doing well. And one of the things that I noticed going in there was a lot of these people are in their 80s, their 70s, their 80s, their 90s, and the only people that were visiting them, they didn't have coworkers, were not visiting them. Friends from high school and college were not visiting them because a lot of them were dead. And neighbors were not visiting them. The only people that were getting visitors were people who had families, who had kids and grandkids, you know, and people who didn't have those, they didn't really get a ton of visitors. Maybe a spouse, you know, maybe. Maybe they were lucky to have a friend who was alive, but no guarantee that friend lived anywhere near them. And seeing those people was heartbreaking. And it really makes you think, like, you know, you could probably reach the pinnacle of your career by 40s, mid 40s. But what after that? Medicine is in an incredible place. And the odds that you're going to live a long time are really high. Like, I know there's a lot of health stuff going on right now in the world, but the reality is like Western medicine, while maybe it's not the best at fixing chronic conditions, fixing acute problems that are killing you right now, bacterial infection, broken bone, heart attack, we're as good as we've ever been at solving those problems. The idea that you're going to die acutely is the odds are as low as they've ever been. And the thing about chronic conditions is they're chronic. They don't kill you in one day. They kill you sometimes they don't kill you, but if they do, they kill you over a very long period of time. And at the rate that medicine is getting better, the odds are we're going to become as good at treating those as we are at acute problems, probably within the next 10 to 20 years. Like if you can last another 10 to 20 years, you're probably going to have most of the answers to your health problems. Probably will have most of them. And so we're already seeing huge breakthroughs in how to treat Parkinson's with stem cells. That's the thing that just came out. Unbelievable results about treating, mental illnesses. Like, keto was developed to treat epilepsy. Now we're seeing that it can, medically accurate keto, not your, keto Guido, Atkins keto, like real medical keto can treat schizophrenia and treat all these other different things, and just enormous breakthroughs. So, you're probably going to live a long time. And knowing that, and knowing that you're going to spend hopefully a lot of it with your partner, and hopefully all of it with your kids. If you don't have that, then what do you have after a certain age? And I think that really scares me. That really scares me a lot, more than anything. So hopefully we can find something. I think that's a good place to wrap it up for today. All right. Goodbye, everybody.